Welcome everyone and Happy New Year. We will be starting the year with taking a look at our current and upcoming regulations, hoping to prepare the food industry for what's to come. My name is Denise Webster. I'm the VP of Food Safety at SCS, responsible for the training and consulting department. I come from food manufacturing as well as retail, and with approved lead trainer for BRC, SQF, all things FSMA, food safety, commercialization, regulatory, you name it, I'm here to help you guys. At SCS, we are an international leader in third-party food safety, environmental, sustainable certifications, as well as standards development. We specialize in auditing certification, verification, training, life cycle assessment, and strategic consulting. With over, we're celebrating actually this year our 40 years anniversary, so there'll be definitely more to come for us in the future. As far as the food and ag service area, as I mentioned, we have the training consulting, but we have a broad range of food safety audit services such as BRC, SQF, our agricultural global gap and Primus, our food claims and labels, gluten-free, plant-based, organic, non-GMO, as well as sustainable agricultural areas for product claims, social compliance, and overall sustainability and agricultural programs. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Our overview will look at the changing food regulations that may impact your organization this year and beyond. We'll then take a deeper dive into those areas that are expected to raise increased scrutiny and enforcement by the FDA. We'll then give you a few tips on how to improve your regulatory and food safety compliance to help continue to grow you and your team, as well as protect consumers and brands. We will end with a moment of Q&A for any questions that you may have. We'll start though with a poll question. So just give me a second, I'll open it up. Okay, so you should see our poll here. We wanted just a pulse check. How would you describe your readiness for 2024? Do you have detailed review and compliance plans you did before the new year even started and you're ready to go? Maybe you're actively reviewing and kind of planning for what it looks like this year. Maybe you're, still celebrating that Happy New Year and your team needs to, work a little bit harder on pulling it together, or there's a commitment. Where are you at in that spectrum of readiness? And then, of course, we hope that this webinar today will give you some support in that area. So we'll give you guys a few more seconds to get your answers in. All right, we'll go ahead then here and close the poll, and then I will share our results. How do you share the results? All right, so I'm not sure if you guys can see the results, but I'll just tell you guys those. There we go. 64% of you are in that good category. You're actively reviewing, planning. You're obviously part of this webinar to support those initiatives. With 8% excellent. Way to go, guys, from getting ahead of us on this. Hopefully you'll gain some additional insights to add to your plans. And 21% improvement. I'm here to help, so it's great. We'll get you guys all kind of set up and really think about, what do you need commitment on? What are the things that we can do in January to prepare us for, what's to come this year? So we'll focus on, in this webinar, FDA, but I will also talk a little bit about USDA and some of those collaborative regulatory items that they're working on together. All right, let me hide that. Okay. So what is FDA working on in 2024? FDA actually publishes their budget summary every year and has continued to increase their budget each year over the past few years. Due to the concern over growing and more complex food industry, also of course the medical product technology area, the global supply chain, and artificial intelligence has been noted in this year's budget justification increase. Overall, there is a 10% increase in the food safety and nutrition sector to be an allocation of 133 million additional funds to help also to continue to modernize FDA's infrastructure, which we'll talk about many of these in more detail later in this webinar. They'll also have noted they're going to continue to roll out the new Era of Smarter Food Safety Blueprint, and we'll cover a couple components of that today. They have noted that their aim is to continue to increase the FSMA inspections. That would be, those that are related to preventive controls, as well as the foreign supplier verification, and just try to get to those pre-pandemic inspection numbers. You've probably heard a lot about it already, the Closer to Zero initiative to protect infants and young children from exposure to toxic elements. We'll talk about a couple of those as well. And proposals. So there will be some active proposals specifically to address food shortages, as well as the desire to have tools that will continue to increase oversight activities when inspection is not possible. This really kind of succeeds what happened to the industry, and they want to be able to ensure that manufacturers are held accountable to notify FDA when they're unable to meet the increasing supply demands. So they want more oversight or insight, I should say, not oversight, insight of that, so they can figure out what they might need to do to resolve that issue. Very much, we saw this in infant formula. We also saw this in ingredients, where FDA actually gave us a guidance document that said they wouldn't have, discretion. They would have enforcement discretion on ingredients if you weren't able to get the exact ingredient you needed for that product on your label, barring that it wasn't an allergen issue or any food safety issues. So those are the type of things that having that proposal in place for authority to do more of that to help the industry as well. They have noted increased oversight of dietary supplements. DSHEA regulations are 30 years old, and FDA is seeking to modernize the requirements to ensure they're safe and properly marketed. At SCS, we are going to be actively focusing on this dietary supplement sector and make sure that we're there to support those of you that are in this industry. Also, it's not all food safety, but also empowering consumers to make healthier food choices. So FDA is looking to put some initiatives around nutrition, which we'll cover. Another initiative that's actually a year in the making, and just recently, as of December 13th, the FDA has provided an update on their proposed new structure around the foods program. This document or proposal details the status of activities and timelines roughly for next steps. It is also now under review by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The agency has stated that they're hopeful to implementation will occur sometime in 2024. So we do need to keep an eagle eye on this and understand exactly what the change could be that might impact our industry. The FDA Commissioner, Robert Califf, has stated that this is a unique moment in the history of FDA. And it truly is, because they are going to create a new unified human foods program, which will include a focus on food safety, chemical safety, and innovative food products category, and agricultural technologies. That new human food program will also have a new Office of Regulatory Affairs, which will be restructured with a focus on, of course, infant formula initially. This will also come with some role changes or some restructuring. They will have a chief, for the first time, a chief of critical foods officer. They'll have a senior advisor for critical foods enforcement and compliance, and a senior regulatory counsel for critical foods. So those of you that have been in the industry for a while, get your resumes into them. These are some great positions focused on our food industry and improving and driving it forward. Also with this change comes a new deputy commissioner of human foods. This was announced back in August, and he's just now getting settled in. He's done a few podcasts and webinars that you might want to take a look at. This new executive position will lead the charge in setting and advancing the priorities of the human foods program. So essentially, he will be those roles boss when it comes to implementing, initiating more FSMA regs rollout, and just like any implementation, when there's a significant change in the food regulations or any regulations, it does have to go through that dreaded OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, where they take a look at the impact of the cost of these changes to the industry, to the cost of the regulatory body. Then once they've done their work, then it goes to Congress. Then there's a notification period, and then there's a negotiation with unions that represented impact staff, especially since we're dealing with some restructuring of divisions and roles. So as you can imagine, this is most likely not going to be towards the back end of this year after it has to go through all those normal legislative requirement processes. I would encourage you to check out the YouTube video if you want to learn a little bit more on this restructuring and, of course, their proposal. Another item that has just reached the news on December 4th was a release of collaboration by the FDA, USDA, and EPA to create a national strategy to reduce food loss and waste in the US. Their goal is to reduce it by 50% by 2030 with an effort to build a more sustainable future. Why? Well, if we just look at the facts, food is the most common material found in landfills. More than 1/3 of municipal waste is organic waste in food, which is equivalent to 66 million tons. And based on a study by the Food Institute a few years back, 20% of food waste in the home was due to uncertainty around expiration dates. So their objectives, they have stated, is to prevent the loss of food and waste wherever possible, increase recycling rate for all organic waste, support policies that incentivize and encourage prevention and increased recycling. And the one that will probably impact us the most is that date labeling and food safety advice, what comes of that. There will be a consumer education campaign, which will actually be spearheaded by the EPA. And the part that FDA and the USDA will be taking is to work directly with industry to advance these goals and to encourage supply chain stakeholders to adopt and leverage tech-enabled digital tracing technologies, which is already under the new Era of Smarter Food Safety initiative, to essentially help reduce food loss and waste. They also want to reduce food loss and waste associated with contamination events. So that I thought was pretty interesting. So if there's a recall on something, not to just, if it's safe, maybe they'll authorize, donations or other mechanisms to be seen. FDA will also continue to encourage that uniform adoption of overall food donation practices, and with an extra emphasis under the food code, which will actually impact our retail sector. That'll give them a little bit more responsibility and accountability to not just throw it away when it is unable to be sold on their shelves. Ultimately, if we take a step back, this is a win-win. They do feel that they can, through this initiative, increase food access for food insecure Americans, increase recovery rate of donations, create new jobs, increase supply chain resiliency, and hopefully financial savings to our households, our pocketbook, especially with the current inflation. So how might this also impact us as a food industry? We can take a look, gather our team, look at our own waste that we're generating in our food manufacturing industry and in agricultural, and see if there's ways at the front end we can also do that better, as well as taking a really hard look at our shelf life and maybe perhaps running those validation studies this year. The next one, which is no surprise, we've been hearing a lot about this, excuse me, the ban on food additives. So FDA has proposed to revoke the regulation authorizing the use of brominated vegetable oil, or BVO. And for those of you that aren't familiar with how it's used in the industry, think about those cloudy citrus type beverages. That BVO helps to suspend it so that doesn't fall out of that solution. So that is essentially the conclusion, is that it was no longer considered safe after the results of some studies by the National Institute of Health that found potential adverse health effects in humans. And for BVO, essentially it is modified with bromine, most commonly used in those key beverages. Not only is FDA, but California has their own initiatives, as always, in California. So I see it front and center. They're also banning BVO, also potassium bromate, propylene, paraben, and FD&C red number 3. And this goes into effect January 1st, 2027. And you might think, well, I'm not in California, our facility, but if you sell to any retailer, if you sell online, if anybody from the state of California can purchase your product, you absolutely are impacted by this. And there has to be some significant considerations in reformulation and ensuring likability by consumers. How can you protect your brand as well and still offer that same beautiful colored product or that suspended product as well. Interestingly enough, though, FDA is currently reviewing the safety of red number 3. So it's not just California on that particular category. So I think that one is definitely should be high on your list if you use it in your products. Then we've got the other ones that we've been hearing a lot about, PFAS. Ultimately, the FDA is still working with the industry to figure out how to phase this out in food contact substances. I know a lot of us are sending surveys out to our raw material suppliers asking if they have PFAS, phthalates, BPA. All of these are still an area of focus. It's a little confusing, to be honest, exactly where and when these additives are going to really have it banned, or whether or not they're just going to sit in this evaluation list like BPA has sat for many years. So my biggest advice on this is to check with your customers, your retailers, right? What did they require? And make sure then that you're staying ahead of their expectations, as well as, of course, looking at the consumer and the safety and how it's used in the product or packaging in which you're selling. Lastly, titanium dioxide. This one has created a little bit of media attention over the past few years, specifically around the candies, Skittles. They said, that, it's, going to create cancer. But then there was a study that was conducted that someone would have to eat over 4,000 Skittles per day to have the same comparative effects as that study that showed that it could cause cancer. So that's a whole lot of Skittles. So even California backed down. They did remove that from their ban list, but it's still, is a petition was filed in 2023. So it's still going to be an area of focus topic. Nothing will probably happen just yet, but it's an area of interest still. Okay, so the Closer to Zero initiative. Here, the effort by the FDA, the state that they're committed to launching, further launching this program through a science-driven, transparent, and inclusive process, right? So they want to work with the industry to figure out this together. There is a multifaceted issue when it comes to things like heavy metals. They're not only do they vary in the environment, but they also vary in the ability of that plant or animal to uptake it from the environment. So there's a lot of inconsistencies, and we need more data to really figure out how we can impact this in a positive light. The regulatory objectives for the Closer to Zero initiative is to try to establish action levels, and we'll take a little look at that here in a minute. Increase targeted compliance and enforcement activities. Monitor levels over time to determine potential adjustments to those proposed action levels. So that's their initiative to, keep looking at it further. And of course, work to find best practices to lower these levels in our products. You may be familiar with Prop 65. They have established a basis for some of those limits, but that's really kind of a very California-focused initiative, and it's not a federal initiative, although many of us have been using that as a framework. So what is the FDA saying? Well, they do have 50 parts per billion for juice, and they have proposed some additional lead-specific limits. So 10 ppb for fruits, vegetables, mixtures, yogurts, custards, puddings, and single ingredient meats. They've added a slight increase for those single ingredient root vegetables, right? Because they're in the ground, they're going to have a higher uptake of any contaminant heavy metals that might exist in those soils, as well as 20 ppb for dry infant cereals. You've probably heard about the recall of the cinnamon applesauce pouches. This was not due to the Closer Initiative to Zero initiative. It actually was a result of adverse events. There were children between the ages of under 1 and through 5 years of age that were reporting that there were an issue, that they were getting sick. And so the CDC, of course, just like any outbreak, did their investigation, and FDA did testing and found certain brands, specifically on cinnamon applesauce. They were able to track it back to an Ecuador location. They collected samples. They do believe it sounds like it's from the cinnamon. And then they came back and actually said, we're also concerned with chromium, although the initial recall was regarding lead. Their results, some of the high results they found were 2,180 parts per billion. So compare that to those proposed limits, and you can see there's an issue. Also with the younger generation, of course, that is an issue, but they found that even after 3 months of consumption of elevated lead levels, they found it in the blood even after 3 months. And there was 205 confirmed cases in 33 states. So there is that legislative goal around trying to prevent this type of thing from occurring. So if you haven't looked at your product, you haven't done heavy metal test results in a while, take a look, do that risk assessment, that hazard analysis, your raw material hazard analysis, and it'd probably be a good idea just to send some stuff out for testing this year to see where you're at for your products. Okay, FDA allergen guidance. We all know about the FASTER Act, of course, but then what happened, right? We, as an industry, had to take a hard look at our products, our processing, how we're using sesame, and figure out a way to either update our label to contain sesame or have additional allergen preventive controls around sesame when it became that top 9 allergen. We know with FSMA, it specifically requires us to implement it significantly minimize or eliminate cross-contact of unlike allergens. But many companies, unfortunately, did not feel that they had the ability, or for whatever reason, and started adding sesame flour to their products in order to mitigate this. Obviously, the FAIR Institute was not happy with this. Consumers were not happy with this. FDA finally came out with a draft guidance to say, ultimately, we do not support this intentional addition to food. Although technically, from a regulation perspective, it's not illegal. It's not, misbranded or adulterated. So they have, little ground to challenge. So they're starting with this, with the draft guidance. Also, of course, if they inspected the facility and you didn't have adequate allergen preventive controls, you might get a 483 or a warning specifically on that, even a potential recall if they find the product is cross-contact and maybe all you have is a may contain statement on it. So it's a tough one. What can we do? Well, note to definitely read that draft guidance. If you have any allergen in your product, read. It's an interesting draft guidance, and there's actually one point that I wanted to flag, which is it does state if you use a may contain statement, you need to have on file a written justification by your PCQI when it's used and why it's used, and appropriate training around it as well. So something to definitely sink your teeth in here this month. And just note that undeclared allergens are still the leading cause of recalls in 2023. I haven't seen the full numbers yet for 2023, but it does appear that we're still leading the undeclared allergens as the leading recall. The new era of smarter food safety. So we've heard a lot about the various initiatives, and there is a few that they are focusing on additionally here in 2024. They've been doing webinars through partnerships to help the industry. One of the items that just landed November is a new FAQ and tools for compliance to the food traceability rule. We still have till January 2026 to get this right. So the industry can use these FAQ and tools to kind of get a better insight on how they can get ahead of this and be in compliance. So the FDA has given a dedicated web page now for this. It's actually offered in 6 languages. They've given examples, so not just definitions, but examples of what a key data element is, a critical tracking event is. They've also given examples of traceability plan. There's a section to apply for a waiver exemption if you feel that this is not applicable based on how the regulations are written. They have some video highlighting tech system solutions, right? Their goal is to not, add a lot of cost to the industry to do this right. So they have spent a lot of time and money initiatives to try to get the industry to look at different cost-effective tech solutions. So they've offered a video highlighting the outcome of that work. There's some fact sheets and guides, and also even an interactive tool that explains critical tracking events. And just remember that if your product is one that isn't impacted and there is a critical tracking event, you have to provide the FDA within 24 hours of that information, the full traceability, in order for them to be able to essentially mitigate an outbreak as fast as they can. That's the ultimate goal. Okay, so what about FDA and that third-party food safety standards? Well, they did launch the final statement around evaluating alignment of the third-party food safety audits. They looked at SQF, BRC, FSSC 22000, and Global Gap. And ultimately, what came out of that is they agreed that there was alignment in general, but no surprise, they stated it's not a substitute for FDA or state regulatory inspections for compliance. But they do acknowledge that it'll help them leverage meeting the agency's public health mission when manufacturers, agricultural farms get these inspections, that it actually, they're aligned and they support this, although it's not a substitution. Another component that I wanted to mention is, don't forget, in these GFSI-based standards, it does require us to meet our food legislative requirements to ensure that we're informed of changes, relevant legislation, for example, scientific development. So the fact that you guys are attending this webinar, this counts as one of those updates for food legislation. So make sure to get credit for this, save a copy of this webinar, put a training form together that you attended it, and that'll help meet some of the requirements for keeping abreast of food legislation. So you're probably all wondering, well, is the FDA going to come to my facility? What is their level of compliance and enforcement? Unfortunately, you've got to talk to the FDA, directly, and you can kind of get some idea. They don't announce an X% increase, or, this is the category that we're going to enforce on a more increased basis, although we can assume the priority is, of course, infant formula sites, high-risk products, anything that's associated with a recall or outbreak. But what there is some updates, though, that we do need to flag for you guys that you have to get ahead of, which is the FSMA Food Defense Intentional Adulteration Rule. So a few years back, they implemented some quick check inspections, but now they have committed to moving towards a comprehensive inspection. So one that could trigger, say, a 483 or even a warning letter. The FDA has already put out guides, food defense plan builder, mitigation tools, and just a couple months ago, we ran a webinar, so check that out if you want more information on this, but this one would be good to prepare. Make sure you do have an FDQI, which is a food defense qualified individual, that they understand how to do a vulnerability assessment. And just because you've downloaded the food defense tool builder, it's not user friendly from the standpoint of understanding the difference between 3 elements and key activity types, or even the hybrid method, and the impact of an inside attacker. So I highly encourage you guys to get that additional training so you can make sure that you're filling this out correctly as these comprehensive inspections are to begin. Additionally, on the compliance and enforcement front, foreign supplier verification program. So if you are you're importing goods here into the US and you fall under needing to meet the compliance of FSVP, this would be a great time to take a look and reassess your programs, make sure they're up to date, you've done all your verification activities, and that you have, again, those qualified individuals that can perform those activities, as FDA will continue to increase inspections on FSVP, as well as you can see when we looked at the warning letters this year for 2023, that the most common issue was actually that the importer did not develop, maintain, or follow an FSVP. So that's telling that there's importers out there don't even recognize this program exists. They do actually have a list of importers on the FSVP website that you can download to see if your name is on there. What about our surveillance inspections? Well, FDA has announced that they do plan to continue to ramp up post-pandemic and make sure that they are getting more, whether it's FDA inspectors or state inspectors out to our food manufacturing sites. What can you do to prepare? Well, make sure you have a regulatory inspection SOP, and that it's not just you as the technical person that would know what to do, that the team is trained. How do we handle it? What do we do? Make sure that SOP is part of your program. Also, our recall readiness. We never know, unfortunately, when a recall might impact us because of a raw material or an industry issue. So we always have to make sure that we are recall ready, even if we feel our ducks are in a row. So conduct those challenge scenarios. Take some deeper dive into not just doing the checkbox of traceability, but look at your recall contact list. Do you have the right office identified from an email and phone number for the recall coordinators for the FDA or USDA or whoever you need in your plan? So that is a really good one to put on your top of your list for this first quarter of the year. Also, it's the end of this year is our biennial end of the year renewal for 2024 for FDA facility registration. And so that will come, usually opens up around, I think, October. Just want to make sure you get that done before the end of the year. Okay, so from an agricultural side, the FDA has updated leafy green STEC plan. So they have stated in early 2024 as part of the New Humans Food Program, they are going to prioritize produce safety. This is not new from last year. Last year, they were also prioritizing produce safety. They have come up, though, with a new fact sheet, specifically looking at adjacent and nearby land use and its impact on produce safety. If we think about what happened in Yuma, that was very much what was going on in that farm area and the impact of things like cows upstream, sharing the same water channels with that romaine lettuce that's close to the ground. They also have noted in their STEC plan a list of accomplishments that they've had over the past 3 years, and they will release findings at some point this year on their test results to hopefully be able to proactively understand the biggest impact and what they need to focus on to reduce these issues from occurring. There's one other collaboration, FDA and USDA with the CDC has an interagency food safety analytics collaboration group. This actually was established back in 2011 to overall improve the coordination between these 3 departments for data collection, analysis, but they launched a report and their annual report for this year to reflect data for 2022 is pending. But when we look at the past reports, we can see that their focus has been, of course, on reducing Campylobacter. USDA has put initiatives around breaded chicken and ensuring that they're working hard to reduce Campylobacter and Salmonella in chicken. Also, of course, 0157 focus on produce and other components of raw agricultural in the industry. And they also produce an annual report of key categories that have a significant increase related to those 3 bad bugs. So why is this important? We'll use this to take a look at your HACCP plan, your food safety plan, your raw materials when you do your hazard analysis. So you can see, if there is that additional susceptibility, and this supports whether there is or there isn't for that particular product. So it's just good data, scientific literature that we can use. USDA, they do something very similar. They do launch what their budget plans are. It's a little different though. Theirs is very focused on making sure they can fully fund the cost of over 8,000 SIS personnel for the inspection of meat, poultry, and egg products in over 6,800 facilities, right? So they have to fund that initiative, which is different than the FDA's approach. They're also focused on improving what they're calling mission critical information. So their technology infrastructure, continue to aid state level meat and poultry inspection. So if you are a USDA facility, note that there are these initiatives that they're working on as well in their categories. And I would encourage you to check it out, their website for any updates. Just to close on that component, FDA, it's not all food safety. There are nutritional initiatives as well. Their goal to end hunger and increase healthy eating and physical activity by 2030. Their main pillars, which is the newest one, is to reduce added sugar consumption. They would like to see a voluntary commitment by key stakeholders like ourselves to reduce and reduce added sugars, decrease child marketing around things like sugary cereal, and improve overall nutritional education. So they'd like us to really put this as an initiative for our brands. Also, prior to this, they did launch some voluntary targets for sodium reduction. So I would encourage you to take a look at those, look at the products that you produce. It's mainly focused around processed prepared foods, of course, because that's where we're going to get a lot of our sodium, our added sodium in our diet from. They're continuing to explore front of pack nutritional labeling schemes. The whole initiative around changing the nutrition label in the first place was to mitigate not having to do a front of pack, but with countries like Mexico, for example, that have implemented front of pack nutritional labels, there might still be some activity. I doubt anything will happen this year significantly, but it's still in the conversation. Also, FDA is still actively identifying or updating standards of identity, focus on removing some that don't make sense and improving some, such as yogurts, to improve a broader scope of products that would be acceptable to be considered, for example, a yogurt. And lastly, they have launched a guidance on plant-based products using the dairy terms. So if you are one of those that have a plant-based product, you definitely want to check out that guidance and see kind of where their mindset is. It's not regulation, but you could potentially kind of get ahead of the curve and see what the impact would be on your associated products. Okay, so for some tips, when we look at, how do we do that plan, do, check, act, what are those things that you could do to make sure that not only you're staying abreast of regulations, but you're able to actually monitor, develop, and implement against them. So just a few things I would encourage to do those. Make sure if you haven't done your end of the year results, doing that 2023 recap, what were your complaints? How can we improve those complaints? Focus on maybe refreshing our environmental monitoring program. Have we been looking at the same, swab sites? Is there a way that we can improve, refresh these programs? Our internal audit, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. Deviations, learning from our mistakes. Where did we have near misses, holds, non-conformances, quality compliance issues, and how can we put a more focused effort to make sure that those don't occur this year and put those true preventive actions in place. And also go back and make sure that we have fully implemented those corrective and preventive actions from those issues that we have had in the past year. And also celebrate successes, of course, if things are, actually doing really well in a particular area. It's doing what it's intended to do. Also, if you haven't yet developed those new KPIs, and it's not those KPIs that are the tried and true ones, but look at how we can focus on continuous improvement and not just the status quo. If we're saying, well, we'll, reduce complaints by 10%, what does that mean? How are we going to get there? If we say we're not going to have a recall as part of our KPI, well, that's an outcome. What is the KPI that's going to be measured to make sure that we're going to improve our allergen management program, that we're going to put more resources, more hurdles in place, more controls. We're going to implement an electronic scanning system, whatever that looks like. Take a deeper dive into those KPIs and not just kind of outcome-based measurements. Also, assess your team's knowledge on regulatory compliance, food safety, and what would they do in the event of a regulatory audit? Are they ready? Are they prepared? Much like I just talked about in terms of developing that SOP. And emphasize overall the importance of training. Continue to find a way to build a more cross-functional team. If you only have one technical person or a couple, or SQF practitioner, you have one primary and substitute, maybe it's time to expand that, have a more cross-functional team, and be able to be comfortable being able to take that vacation, for example. Obtain leadership commitment. This, either at the back end of last year or this year, you were probably asked to, put your goals and your resource funding, right? Have you got that commitment? Did you provide specific requests for resources and what it was going to achieve? If not, look at that, implement what goals and programs do you want to implement? What do you want to achieve and what would it take to get there? I can't focus enough on this tip, which is improve the tools in your toolbox, which is your internal audits. It is the foundation for success for all of our food safety and regulatory systems. Make sure we have our updated validation and verification schedules. That includes our internal audits. Expand that internal audit team. This way it helps increase the frequency. You're not just doing everything one time. You're really doing it based on risk. Also, having new people on the team offers new insights. I was just 2 days at a facility, that I'm able to offer a new set of eyes, come with different experience and education, and just overall be able to expand and challenge our programs through putting more extra effort on our internal audits. That probably does include an initial or refresher training for the team on the importance of internal audits. And evaluate your past internal and external audit trends. Make sure any non-conformances that you did get in your GFSI audits last year, that you've put the extra initiative to ensure those corrective and preventive actions are still working so you don't have a repeat issue. Another one is to focus on more direct observations and interviews during your internal audits. You're not just looking at a procedure or a record, but go out there in the facility. Observe, spend 20 minutes observing, interview, ask what they need, really take that deeper dive and challenge your programs. So I believe that tip can have a lot of systemic positive impacts. And maybe come up with some New Year's resolutions. Here's just a few that you could use to get started. That we commit to transform promises and goals into reality. Easier said than done, but always a good resolution. We apply food safety practices every day while keeping up with operational and quality demands, right? We know that those can work hand in hand as well as against each other. So we got to make sure that we're considering those. And that our team's proactive, risk aware, and strives for continuous improvement. And everyone is empowered to provide feedback, create a positive food safety culture, and that we ultimately are achieving all of these components every day to protect consumers and our business. Okay, so just to let you guys know, we have launched our 2024 training schedule. Check it out. We offer public, private, on-demand, interactive training. You'll see a little screenshot video here. I'm super excited about our on-demand training that we're coming out with interactive gamified type training for the modern learners. Fun little videos to really engage those that we are training. Also, SCS Consulting Services, check out our website. We have a wide range of services from sustainability to food safety to all things in between. So take a look at our services drop-down tab to see if there's anything that you might need. So now, with further ado, we'll open it up to some questions, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to go ahead and put some questions in the chat field. If you haven't, feel free to start putting those in, and just give me a second to open that up. Let me see here. I can't see it. There we go. Okay, I can sort of see the question. Sorry, just give me. second to try to expand this out so I can actually read them. Here we go. Okay, now I can see them. All right. All right. So I'll just kind of randomly take a look at these. So what is needed to show you are qualified to be a food defense qualified individual? Great question. So when you look at the regulation, it says that that individual must be trained on the vulnerability assessment, right? The food defense and understanding what the requirements are from the regulation. Now, just like preventive controls for human food or animal food, a PCQI, it's the same definition, right? We can do it through, our experience, education, but all of us know that we, recognize that it was important to undergo the FDA training that has been, developed. So I would highly encourage you guys to look at having that IAVA training. We're actually offering it a few times. I think we have it coming up here too soon. But it's really important that if you don't go through the actual training there are on FSPCA website, there's some videos, but those don't really dive deeper into the 3 elements and the difference between that and the key activity types and how to actually use it. So although there are, different ways that you can achieve that, so take a look at the definition. So the qualifications required. Yes, exactly. Let's see, where can we find heavy metal limits for regulations like California? So that is under the Prop 65. So if you go to the Prop 65 website, there is for not just heavy metals, but various chemicals that can impact the food industry. There's roughly about 15 we've identified through those things that have been create legislative issues, or not legislative issues, but issues for food businesses where they essentially get sued. So I can definitely provide you guys a link where to find that. There's safe harbor limits. So if your product is under that limit, that means you don't have to disclose. You don't have to have that Prop 65 disclosure. But if you guys need more assistance on Prop 65, we'll put some info in when we send out this webinar, and you can always reach out to us for more info as well. All right, let me try to expand this here. Someone asked about recording of this training. Yes, we will be recording this and sending out to all of those who have registered. We also have it on our webpage, so you can access, so we should have that up by next week or so. Then you can, if you want to share it with a colleague, they can just go in and do the on-demand webinar. Heavy limits for metal limits for dietary supplements. That one's an interesting one because for the dietary supplements area, you have a very different type of regulation in terms of what is required for testing. So if you're a dietary supplement, you have to make a determination of what is those potential risk in that dietary supplement that you're offering. Traditionally, there are the USP methods, right, that are used. So you want to make sure you're using the right method. It definitely requires a little deeper dive there. And we will be doing some more webinars this year on dietary supplements, especially once we hear more about what FDA plans on achieving. So not directly, you have to dig a little deeper on that one. Let's see here. So just back on the food defense, you're having QA managers retake the food defense training. We're reviewing the plans earlier this year, and they've gone through their 3-year assessment. What else can we do? Yes. So my recommendation would be, if you feel like you've got the training done, you've got the plan in place, is to go back and take a look at your mitigation strategies. Are they working? Have you developed any, new areas of risk? Did you put in maybe a large vat of product that could be open? Because remember, Food defense, as it's related to the FDA regulation, is not just about site security. It's about access to the food and the ability to contaminate it to cause a wide-scale public health harm. So you want to make sure you're challenging your program, and I'm sure you're probably doing that as part of your GFSI anyways, but making sure, yes, you've documented that reassessment, and you're really looking at that potential for the inside attacker and exposure and access to product. And so if you just have site security, it's not enough. It's not going to meet FDA's expectations. Let's see. I have a question. Could SCS develop training on GMP feed requirements? Yes, we're actually developing a lot of on-demand GMP training coming up as well. And we are digging a little deeper on how we can help support the feed industry. So we can reach out directly, but definitely take a look at this year. We've got a lot of initiatives to help support the industry in all the different components, not just food manufacturing and ag, but things like feed. And yes, we do offer SQF and HACCP in Spanish. So that is new to our program as of last year. And we're excited to continue to expand training in Spanish. FDA gave any limits for sodium percentages or amounts? Yes, check out FDA's voluntary sodium guidelines, and it's based on product category, and see how that might impact where you guys are at in your product. So definitely check that out. Let's see, plant-based products. Yes, there is the guidance. Take a look at that guidance. It's mainly focused though on more of using the definition of milk on a plant-based product, or on something that is meat as well even. There's a lot more to come on that, although at SCS we do have a new plant-based product claim, and it has a very rigorous checklist that can help the industry comply and give consumers confidence in the product. Let's see here. There's a few technical questions I see. So as always, if there's any question we don't answer, can't really dive into, or can provide you guys more information with the webinar, when we send this out to you, we'll send you more information on your questions specifically. And everybody will be able to gain value from that. See if there's one more before we leave here. Is the closer to zero initiative only affect formula products? No, that's just where they kind of started, but it is going to be focused on the whole baby and toddler category. So that's pouches, puffs, anything that's affecting food that's targeted to babies and infants and toddlers. Okay. Is there any new or emerging legislation related to food packaging? So there is a few actually. So I will add that to our response and give you guys some links, although it's still lagging. Although many food packaging companies are now getting on the GFSI bandwagon, making sure you guys are, going through that food safety system. I was in a facility the other day, and they're like, well, we got to wear hairnets now. Yep, it's just part of that evolution. Got to have a HACCP plan for packaging, right? So I feel like from a legislation perspective, we're a little bit behind still, but from an industry, we're moving at lightning speed. Okay, excellent. And I see, yes, a lot of questions on heavy metals, so I'll do my best to give you guys some more information around that in our response. Okay, well, it's top of the hour, just a little past. So thank you guys for attending. I appreciate it. And we will definitely get this out to you guys. And if you need to reach out, you'll have our contacts here and as well, just overall. So thank you for your time, and till next time.